My guest today is Laurie Muse, a mom of seven children, ages 9 to 22, who has been an active stay-at-home mom and homeschool mom for 27 years. Laurie is the founder of World of Wonder Hybrid Microschool and Homeschool Enrichment Program in Union, Kentucky, which is near Cincinnati, Ohio. She launched the homeschool enrichment program in the fall of 2023 with sort of one-off classes for homeschooled students with about 40 students initially. Now she has 140 students, or actually more than that, as the enrichment program takes off. And in addition to the homeschool enrichment program, Laurie launched this past fall of 2024, a hybrid microschool program that's a 3 day a week microschool that now serves roughly 15 students ages 5 to 11 with two teachers. So, Laurie Muse, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Thank you, Kerry. Thank you so much. I am very humbled to be here and I am nervous too. I've been following you for really almost the beginning of your podcast. My second son, gave me your book to read because we are avid education pursuers here. We study and read about that. And then I found your podcast. And over time, eventually, I was led to start a microschool, probably because of the support your guests gave me. So thank you.
Oh, I love that. I love to hear stories like that. That's why I do what I do, is to hopefully
Wonderful.
provide a platform for inspiration and encouragement by bringing together other founders to share their founder journey of how they became education entrepreneurs. And now it's great that you felt that inspiration and were able to go off and create your own program and now can inspire others with your story. So full circle here.
Thank you.
Lori. Yeah, just great to have you, and I'm excited to see about the growth that you've already had with your enrichment program and microschool, and want to talk more about that and kind of the plans for the future there. But I'd love to start, if we could, with the beginning of your homeschooling journey. You
Sure.
began homeschooling your oldest son when he was just 6 years old. And then, continued homeschooling your remaining children. Tell us a little bit about what led you to homeschooling back then and what homeschooling was like at the time.
Sure. And on one little clarification, I wish he was 22. He is 32.
32. Sorry. Thank you
And
for.
22 would make me 10 years younger, and that would be amazing.
Ah.
But he's 32. So
So
anyway,
there, so that just to clarify, yes,
yes.
correct what I said before in my
Okay.
introduction, that your kids range in age from 9 to 32. So
Yes.
when Spencer, your oldest, was 6, you started
Yes.
homeschooling him. Yeah, tell us about that.
Okay. So I know you asked for people's backstory, so I've been thinking like, where do I start with my story? It's a little bit different. Mine is more of a personal story, not as professional as many of your guests have and share. So I would like to say that I became a mom when I was 17. So I was a teen mom, and when that baby boy, who was Spencer, when he was placed in my lap and in the hospital, the feeling is, the feeling was, I've got to do something better for this baby. This
Hmm.
baby deserves something more than I had, but I didn't know what it was and I didn't know how to do it. But I just had, like most mothers, that feeling of I'm going to give this child the very best, comes over you as a mother. And so, um, about a year later, I actually had a religious change. And so I became a born again Christian. I became a serious Christian, I would say. That's the term I would maybe say. And so I started to study scripture more and then just do change my life in those ways. And so then my son grew, and I I'm wondering why I thought we were thinking about preschool, and I knew one homeschool family in my life, and they came to my parochial school, and they were weird. Okay, so they were they were the weirdest family. That is terrible to say, of course. But I was like, when I was a teenager, I was like, okay, that's way weird. And is that even legal? How do you not send your kids to school? That is probably illegal. So then I was like, I went to debate or I went to check on a preschool, and I was led to this lady who was the preschool director of this preschool. And I told her my dilemma, and I don't even know. Oh, I know how. I'm so sorry. I met another homeschooling family, and they were really brilliant people. She was a brilliant mom. And so I was like, okay. So, and she talked to me about homeschooling. That's what it was. And so I was like, okay, so that's how I was thinking about it. And I was like, I did find out it was legal. And then I was like, wow, this is a thing. People do it. And I'm probably read or must have listened to some other things, but I went to this preschool and this teacher, the preschool director, told me, and I was just praying and worrying and thinking about it. And she said, Laurie, you can choose one or the other and change it later. And I was like, well, you're right. I could. This isn't like the decision for eternity.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, all right. So So eventually, when he got a little bit older, we chose, which a lot of persuasion on my husband's part, because that one family that was weird was the only family he knew too. And so he was like, no, 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 our kids are going to be very weird. And so then at that time, he said, okay, I'll give permission if you do it, but only until high school. Well, we homeschooled most of our kids through high school too.
It worked out well.
So it
No,
worked
so
out. And I was like, sure, sure, that's fine. In 8 years, we'll have another conversation.
yeah.
So that's how we got into homeschooling.
I love that. And this was in sort of the mid to late 1990s then that you started, Lori. What
Yeah.
was, maybe the better way to ask this is, what have you noticed over these past, 2+ decades with
Oh my
homeschooling?
goodness, it's changed so, so much. Well, really on the front end, there was still a lot of curriculum because I went to a curriculum fair even about that time in Louisville, Kentucky, and it was massive then. It was a lot even then, and so it was still overwhelming. Like, what are we going to use? What curriculum you're using is mostly the question everybody asks, and they still talk about that. What are curriculum? What curriculum? So that was a big, I would say a lot of changes have taken place, first off, in the amount of people, because when my son was 6, 7, 8 years old, if you met one or two homeschooling families, you were best friends. You
Right.
were like, okay, we're going to go to the park together. How about we teach science together and let's go on field trips together? And then also I would say now I since then I learned maybe differently, but I would say a large amount of people were in it. They were very devout Christians or devout religious people. And they also, a lot of people had large families. I mean, it was kind of the thing to do. You homeschooled your children if you cared that much about a religious upbringing. It was not everybody, but a lot of those first homeschoolers, I believe, were more doing it for more moral and religious reasons, I would say.
Hmm.
And that is kind of even the reason why I began. But what happened is when I began to homeschool, maybe out of those reasons to give my child a better moral foundation, I had to learn how to do it. So that's when I got deeply studying education.
Mm.
And so then I started to think, well, we're not really going to bring public school home, but what is school going to look like? Because there's not going to be the bells and the social pressures to get your child to sit like the school has all the social pressures and the culture of school is to obey. Well, children at home don't have that culture. I mean, ours didn't. So, um, then as a homeschool mom, you go to, well, okay, are we going to start early in the morning? Like, are we going to be a school? And then you change over time. And I think most homeschooling moms change to become more relaxed because the your life requires it. So I don't know if it's a paradigm shift or a philosophy shift or more a practicality shift of I can't run 7 hours a day for you four kids each. So we're going to figure this out, how to do 2 hours of school so I can do the laundry. And so I think,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I agree. I've homeschooled my oldest daughter all the way through. She's a senior right now, and I had that sort of same experience. I think that for me, and maybe you saw this too, Lori, it was also just seeing how much they're able to accomplish in a short amount of time, so that you don't need the 6 or 7 hours a day of education that happens in a conventional school, and that you just see how much they're learning through their everyday living, through their interests and their, the projects they're undertaking. I don't know if that was your experience too. I think some of it, yeah, it's definitely, again, as a mom of four, I agree that it's the overall household work too. But I also think it's just a recognition of what teaching and learning looks like in homeschooling that's quite different from a conventional classroom.
It is. It's quite different. And that's usually the first time thing I tell moms is you are not a school, so don't try to
Yeah.
be at school. And they're like, what do you mean? But I'm doing homeschool. So I think for some odd things, some interesting things for my own situation is our oldest son is and was dyslexic. And so I also have a couple other, like three for sure sons that are dyslexic. And so that put an odd, that was a bump, a hill in my
Mm.
way. Because as I started to just roll out regular curriculum to this child, what other people were using did not work.
Hmm.
And I was going by the manual. I would say, okay, I'm supposed to say this, you're supposed to say this is supposed to work. And it wasn't working. And so I had to study dyslexia right away and getting help for him in those ways. So that was, I mean, it was so hard because I was told everything was supposed to go like this. But 25 years ago or whatever, there wasn't a lot of dyslexia chatting
Yeah.
about what to do. They didn't have the science of reading. Orton Gillingham, I did find out about Orton Gillingham 20 years ago, but it wasn't on everyone's tongue like it is.
Right.
So I had to do a lot of research on that. Um, so his learning, he struggled because the expectations we had for him or I had for him or the traditional norms didn't work for him. And it didn't really work for him. And I tell families with children with dyslexia, I mean, my son is brilliant and successful and a great learner and a super person, but he did not read a book until he was 18 years old. Like he had profound dyslexia and he did audiobooks, but like reading a book. And so now as an adult, he reads fine, but so there can be some challenges there.
Yeah.
I found quickly Charlotte Mason. So
Yes.
we did go into the Charlotte Mason style homeschooling right away.
Tell
And
us about that, Laurie, for those who don't know. I
well,
love Charlotte Mason.
I do too. I did not actually read her original series. She has like an original series of like six. I believe she would be, was it the 19th century?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, okay. I what I read are books about her, like people who did actually read her six or seven original home education series. So she actually taught people how to run little micro schools, basically.
Yeah.
So she didn't teach people how to homeschool. And so that's why I think even in the movement, you have to be cautious because Charlotte Mason was still teaching how to run micro schools
Mm,
and not homeschools. So I think running a homeschool is very different because you literally are everything all day to all the children and you're managing your home,
mm.
which later gets into why I love the microschool movement because, and especially the hybrid microschool movement, what I wouldn't have given to have a microschool when I was having all of the babies. But anyway, so Charlotte,
Yes, yeah.
so yeah, we can go there. But yeah, Charlotte
Yes.
was profound to show the short lessons
Hmm.
and living books. So right away with people like Sally Clarkson, Charlotte Mason, oh, I was trying to think of who else. There was others that I learned about the value of literature
Yeah.
Oh, Konos was big then. Did you ever look into the Konos curriculum?
No.
Konos. I don't know what happened to the founder of that curriculum, but that was a hands-on curriculum based on um, character traits. And she was a homeschooling mom who had been a teacher, created this whole curriculum based on character traits. So I was just studying so much about how children learn
And
and the
yeah, and Charlotte Mason also, correct me if I'm wrong, had a big focus on nature study
nature
and
study.
time
Yes,
outside.
I'm a huge time outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she had, oh, I'm not an expert on Charlotte Mason by any means, but yes, so she was living books, which is one of our core
And that's
values.
like sort of classic literature,
Well,
right?
she called it living books, meaning yes, classics, but definitely the type that you feel inspired when you're reading them. They're
Mm.
not boring. They weren't written by a textbook team. They
Mm.
were written by one author with usually higher and beautiful language and inspiration, that type of
Yeah.
definition for a living book.
Yeah. So, okay, so you went through this homeschooling experience. Yeah, and just sort of thinking back to that time, kind of the internet was just coming on the scene. We started, there might have been the kind of emergence of mommy blogs kind of in the early 2000s. But those resources that we now see everywhere for every type of learner, for every educational philosophy, just didn't really exist there. So it was tough going. And especially, with if you had dyslexic children, kind of finding those resources for them. So kudos to you for that experience. And then, you said to me, Lori, that over that period of time of homeschooling your kids, you were always sort of engaged with the homeschooling community and running various homeschooling programs kind of here and there. Tell us a little bit about that. And then ultimately, how did you make the jump from sort of these one-off homeschooling classes to then an established homeschool enrichment program in 2023 and then a microschool in 2024?
Yeah, that's an interesting journey too. So at the very onset, I valued group learning, and I knew that I have very social children, and I knew that was vital to them. And so for two reasons, for them, and also as a parent, you want other teachers with other skills to invest in your kids. So
Hmm.
I knew both. I knew they needed other people, and I knew they needed social. So experiences. And then even the peer pressure to higher learning. So when they see other kids reading and doing cool projects, then that pressure is there, that exposure from those students. I knew I wanted that for the kids. So I would always get involved in like mom schools, mom co-ops. That was from the beginning. We would do that different situations. Um, I've had them in my home. Like one time, this is really cool. And one of the reasons why I like to teach this and say this is because I want moms and families to seek out resources. That
Yes.
is probably one of the things that I try to teach the most is, don't just expect the school to provide everything your family and your child needs, and to seek out what all the resources you have in around you, whatever. And every person in every town is going to be different, because your church is going to be different, your community is going to be different. But there's going to be all these resources, and I would say that that's probably one of my giftings, or one of the things that I would bring to the table is I would do that for my kids. So
Mm.
like for instance, one we knew someone, and he was a builder. Actually, this we did twice. So I was like, hey, will you build with my child? Will you?
Mm.
So he built a big, huge lemonade stand with my son when he was like 12, taught him tools and da da da. And then another time we had a co-op. This was one when we had in our house, and we did a carpentry class because also I knew another man who was a carpenter. And I'm like, hey, will you teach the kids carpentry? So using all the resources that you have. But so one time we had a co-op that was in my house and my neighbor's house. We were both a homeschooling family. Luckily, when I moved into our house before this house, we lived there 20 years. The house right here in our house, she had 9 children, and she was a homeschooling family. And we were right here. And so our kids they basically had a little mini microschool right there.
Yeah, right,
So,
right.
so we had kids in her house and kids in my house, and we had at that time one of the grandmothers of a friend of mine was a retired teacher, and she was a master teacher. So we contacted her, and she came in and ran the language arts.
Mm.
Another teacher, another homeschooling mom was a teacher. She ran the science, and then we had other topics, just all kinds of different things. And then actually, this was funny. This is my dentist came and taught a biology class at our house because,
Love
again,
that.
she was
Yeah.
before she had children, she became a friend and she loved teaching. And I'm like, hey, why don't you come and teach? I'll get 10 children, 10 teenagers in my kitchen table. Will you teach biology? And so,
So you had these sort of co-ops,
yeah,
sort of the typical homeschooling relationship where, you might bring in outside educators or you might take turns at different
yeah.
homes, the homeschooling parents doing different classes, but nothing sort of paid, not sort of these microschool models or enrichment
We did
programs.
pay the teacher. We did
Oh,
pay
okay.
all these teachers.
Oh, great.
Yeah, we did pay the grandmother who was the master teacher. We did pay my friend who was a dentist. And we had another gentleman who was a homeschool teacher. He retired and he actually went around to homeschooling co-ops and taught for pay. So
Okay.
we paid him as well. But so
So
I
then
think,
yeah, so then how did that evolve into the enrichment program, kind of this drop-off program that also
well,
had paid teachers, but was a slightly different model?
that's a good question. I'm going to say because of all right. So we right before COVID, we had a really thriving co-op experience at the YMCA, but it was some paid and some volunteer. It was a
Hmm.
hybrid of paid and volunteer.
Yep.
Well, of course, that shut down. And then during COVID, we re-upped again, but in homes.
Hmm.
And then as co-ops do, if you know much about them, they can
Yes.
grow and have good and bad.
Right.
And so at sometimes in the co-op world, you have tired nursing mothers who come in to teach classes that they've been assigned to teach and they don't want to teach the class. And actually, they're too tired to teach the class. And so sometimes our co-op experience was like, I think if we paid teachers, and I would always say this to the moms, I think if we paid professionals, we're going to do better. So that was one aspect of that experience. Well, another is we we belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that's where we choose to worship. Well, in the scene in Kentucky, in the Christian world, often we are not welcome in Christian circles. I know that that's hard to believe, and it is. So as I tried to become more involved in after some of these other co-ops you know, dissipated, I would, I found a really cool co-op that I wanted to join so bad. They interviewed me and they interview you on faith. They ask you to share your faith. And so I was happy to do that, happy to talk to them. Well, the director approved our family because she'd met me, but then she took our name back to their board and they disapproved me because of the church that we go to. And that happened several places. And so then I was like, it happened one time, and I actually started a co-op with people that were atheists or non-denominational or mostly secular, I should say, atheists and secular. And that was great. I learned so much from that. There is a whole nother group of people that homeschool for secular reasons that I found out. It was so fantastic. I love that experience. But that again needed to change for different reasons. So, me not having a support for my children
Mm,
is how I started the next program, which was the enrichment program. So then I had to start something for ourselves.
right.
That's why I started the enrichment program. And so that was really great that first year with the 40 students.
This was last year. This was
Yeah,
2023,
yeah, we
roughly
had
40 students.
we had amazing cooking class. It was 2 hours. It ran all year. My kids learned so much. They cooked three parts of a meal every week. It was fantastic. We held that in our local extension office for free. So we were able
Like
to,
what do you mean by extension office?
it
Like,
is the county.
okay.
In Kentucky, there's counties. Most states, I think they have counties.
Hmm.
And like agricultural
Oh,
4-H,
right.
like a
Right, right,
4-H
right.
agriculture extension. It is the most gorgeous facility you will find. And they
Right.
let you use it for free because we at the time we were able to pay our teachers, but we ourselves were not making money. We
Yeah.
weren't a business at that time.
Okay.
I am an LLC now, but at the time we were just a community group,
Yeah.
just getting together. So we could use that for free. But they changed our schedule all the time. And so homeschooling families didn't like that as much. That was why
Mm.
we needed to move to a new location. But now there's a whole story of how the microschool came about.
Yeah.
And that is because my seventh child didn't do well in homeschool. It happens. There are children that just do not do well in homeschool, and he was one of them. My fourth son probably didn't do well in homeschool either, but I just pushed it anyway. And he's 20 some now, 25. That was when he was like 9 or 10. And I did not know what I know now about education. So I was like, sit in your chair and you need to do your work. Why aren't you doing it? I would do it all differently now. But oh, well, so my seventh son, he's our only child we sent to preschool. We sent him to, we didn't send him to kindergarten because that was the mask year, but we sent him to first grade. And then I thought, well, I'm going to try to homeschool. We sent him, no, it doesn't work with him. It just doesn't work with him. So we sent him, I'm like, what are we going to do? Well, I'm going to send him to public school. That's our only option. We didn't have any micro schools here.
Hmm.
Um, and also the Christian schools it's the same model as the public school. So I wasn't like, I'm not going to pay for the same model when I can send him to the public school for free.
Right, right.
So we sent him there. We actually had two amazing teachers, amazing, but they have no individualized instruction. They have no customization at all. And this is one of my dyslexic sons.
Mm.
So at the end of second grade, he was reading at the beginning of, maybe at the end of first grade. And I was so hoping that the school would teach him to read. I was like, oh, good. I'm not going to have to teach reading. This is going to be so awesome. The first child, I'm going to be like, you can teach him reading. Well, they didn't.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, I want you to teach him reading. Um, so we went in and talked with the school, and I said, can you please teach him a first grade material? And they said, that's illegal. We cannot do that. And I said, well, I'm his mother. I'll sign a paper and I'll sign that I'm putting him in first grade curriculum. However you want to do it, you can plop him in the first grade classroom. You can just let the second grade teacher give him first grade curriculum, put him on a computer. I don't care, but just teach him where he is.
Right.
That's illegal. We cannot do that. We have to have this many minutes of this child in second grade curriculum because it's the law. So I was like, I was so frustrated. I was like, but you say you're for the child. But I get it. She's the principal and she has to do what Kentucky law says. So I was like, okay, this is not working. Well, we got him special ed testing, which takes like 4 or 5 months because they didn't listen to me at the beginning of the school year when I said, this is where he is. This is where his first grade teacher said he was. No, we have to have 3 months of data. And then we have to schedule the test and then do the tests. So by the end of second grade, he got an IEP for dyslexia or for reading issues. But about I don't know when it was, but it was about, say, early spring when my very intelligent child who loves machines, loves talking, loves lawn mowing, wants to own his own lawnmower business, is incredibly curious, told me that he was not smart.
Mm.
And I said, "You are smart." He said, "Mom, I'm not smart." And I was like, "Of course you're smart." And he said, "Well, I'm not smart at school."
Mm.
And so stopped and I said, "I've been listening to your podcasts. Like I've been listening to these podcasts for months at this point, year, maybe a year. This is what happens to me. I get interested in something and then God shows me why I was interested in that later." So I'm like so fascinated by microschools. And so about that time, my second son, who was fully homeschooled K through 12, except mostly self-directed, because we mostly did self-directed in high school with our homeschool learners. And I can talk about that maybe on another show or something, but so what self-directed high schooling looks like for homeschooling. But so he is into business and blah, blah, blah. And I was talking to Hunter about that. He's sort of like my co-founder with the microschool, or at least he's the business founder. So I was talking to him about what I'm going to do or what I needed to do. And he said, "I'll help you. I love microschools." He gave me your book. He listens to your podcast as well. And he actually has 3 children. I have 11 grandchildren. So 3 of my grandchildren are hunters. And that was when she was 4. Now she's 5. And he's like, "Well, Mom, I might want a microschool for my Lulana too." So I'm
Mm.
like, "Okay, well, I'll do it. I'll create it if you just help me with the business part." And so that's what we did. I started interviewing teachers. I mean, it was so bold of me to think that I could do this, but
But you did it.
we did it.
You did it. That's what's
No,
so
we did it.
incredible. Yeah. And you now are, you continue to grow. You said you just got a few more students just in the
Yep,
last week. So clearly there's local demand, not only for the homeschool enrichment program that now has over 140 kids, but now your micro school with about 15. So tell us a little bit more about how both of these programs work.
sure.
How do they complement each other? Give us a little bit of the details there.
I was going to run a 4-day micro school, but I met with Melanie from Anchor that you had her on your show.
Yes,
She was
Melanie
one
Leoni.
of, yes, she was one of the very first, and I call her my mentor, my friend now, my mentor. She was one of the first micro school founders that I contacted, and she actually did deep training with me. Like she went over her whole program. She answered a ton of my questions. And so after I spoke with her, she runs a 3-day, and she said it was really successful. And so we got to thinking we could run a 3-day micro school in the 4th day enrichment program.
Mm,
So it would be an option. Could give parents a 4-day program if they opted for that, which is funny. We didn't have anybody opt to do that. Excuse me. They really like the 3 days
interesting.
in the program and then the other days, excuse me, at home. And so what I was thinking, oh, the micro school. So we went to 3 days. That's what it was. So we thought, okay, well, we'll do 3 days and then we'll keep the Friday for the enrichment. So that's how we chose the days. So that's how that part got
Yeah.
determined.
And where are you meeting now? I think you said
Okay.
you sort of switched locations from the
Yeah.
enrichment center. Yeah.
Yes. So we knew we couldn't put the micro school in the enrichment center. And anyway, and we wanted to move that program. And I work a lot in interfaith relations and on a lot of interfaith committees. And one of our meetings was at this church. And I was like, wow, this would be a great micro school right here. And so I just started to investigate with the pastor, like, what do you do with your building in the day? And, would you be open to think it used to be a preschool, but they shut that down. They had a lot of problems. And so we investigated and researched. They interviewed us and they allowed us to rent space there.
Mm,
So we run the micro school in 2 rooms. They give us 2 rooms that are standalone rooms. We do not have to take our school supplies in and out. We were really concerned about that. The teachers didn't really want to do that. So luckily we do have 2 standing classrooms. And then they meet in that building on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then Friday we meet in that building and we use I don't know, 6 or 7 of all of the classrooms for the enrichment classes, which we have about 12 or 13 teachers.
Incredible. Wow.
Paid, yeah, they're all paid teachers.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit about your curriculum. You mentioned curriculum earlier in terms of, being interested in various curriculum when you were a homeschooling mom and then often getting inquiries about curriculum. What curriculum are you using specifically in the microschool?
Oh, in the microschool. Oh, goodness. So I like to say, I read this on somebody else's website, and I thought that is so beautifully said. I like to say that we have access to a lot of different curriculum.
Mhm.
We do have access to Math UC. For math, we have IXL workbooks, and we have the Orton Gillingham manuals and Explode the Code workbooks, and other reading things like that. But what we like to do is individualize for the
Yes.
children and use whatever we need for the child. So, an interesting feature of this is I'm not a teacher at the microschool. So, for non-teaching founders, it's a different ballgame than being a teaching founder because for so many reasons. Because I ha the teacher sets the tone in a classroom. And so while I have definite principles that I believe in and want our program to include and lead out from, I knew I needed to determine a lot of the specifics with our teacher, with who the teacher, what their strengths and their paradigm and their philosophy was to get that kind of together, married together, what I was hoping for, what is important to me, and what is important to them. And so we had a bit of a trouble getting teachers because teachers didn't know what we were creating. I'm like,
Mm,
um, and so I would say our philosophy is hands-on learning, literature rich, personalized instruction, and a great deal of outdoor time.
mm,
That would be like the key of what I'm creating right now and what we lead out from. So, and our ages are 5 to 11. Because in a micro school, you kind of maneuver according to who shows up. So we ended up getting a good amount of kinders, like 6-year-old kindergarten. So what we do is we have 2 classrooms. We have a kinder classroom, which was our 5 and 6s, and we have the older kids, which were about 7 to 10.
mhm,
And so our main teacher is a former homeschool mom of 5 and a science and art teacher.
mm.
So she's in her 50s. She's bubbly. She is Spanish descent. She has just got a lot of energy. She is full of life. So she brings what she wants to her classroom.
Right.
So I give the teachers freedom to
Yes.
develop what they want. And so you should see her classroom. It is unbelievable. She has hands-on lessons for everything. And so basically we have the morning time all together. So, and this is very similar to what Melanie described to me in her program. So we have, not exactly, but similar. So we have like a 30-minute welcome. Everyone's together. They might start off with some picture books or discussing the theme or doing some joint activity. And then they split into the 2 groups for what we call core time. And so they will work on their math and reading skills, handwriting and things in those 90 minutes to 2 hours with those separate teachers. So maybe given about 5 to 8. The kinders has definitely 8. So the other class was like 5 to 8. Let's see, 4 to 8 kids in
Mm,
that group. And the teacher could do what they needed for those kids. We do have access to computers and some online things as well. And then after the 2 hours, they have lunch and playtime for about an hour to, and in the beginning of the day, they also have like a 15 or 30-minute playtime. I forgot to say that too. So then after lunch, they have a longer playtime. and lunch, and then they come back to project time. And so they're all together studying. Basically, in the homeschool world, we call it unit studies.
Right.
They they call it project-based learning now. And we also used to call things delight directed. I don't know if you ever, I don't remember who coined that phrase. I remember hearing it. And he did a ton of presentations on delight directed schooling. And so we like to say we're delight directed. I like to say we're hands-on projects, but
Yeah.
it is teacher led at this point. We
Right.
haven't really developed our program yet to be student led, as far as like students saying, I'm going to be over here studying dinosaurs while you guys are over there doing your human body project. We don't really do that yet. I think in time, as we progress, we can do that. And also, space limits that. We have two small classrooms.
Right.
So, space kind of limits.
Yeah. Well, I can see why you're growing, why so many people in your community are interested in your program. What are you finding as both programs grow, the enrichment program that's 1 day a week and the 3 day a week microschool? Who is attracted to these programs? Are they people who've always been homeschooling? Are they people coming from traditional public schools? What are you finding?
That's a great question. I'll start with the enrichment program. The enrichment program is largely homeschool families, all of them are. And the homeschooling in Kentucky is growing so fast. And I didn't get to say this earlier, is a lot of people are coming into homeschooling as a reaction to their experience in public school. Whereas the
Mm,
original homeschoolers, more of it
mm,
was philosophy. I'm not sending my child because I have some philosophy issues or religious issues. The current homeschoolers are coming in because their child is not being served or socially abused. Bullied is a big term, or just not functioning well. I think the autism epidemic is playing a huge part in a lot of people homeschooling their children. They're not getting the types of educational services they need. So the homeschooling movement is now a lot of people who knew homeschoolers, and the homeschooling movement was super successful. It's like a buzzword. Everybody knows people that do it. People think, well, I can do that. Like everybody does that now. So I'm
right.
like, I'm just gonna pull my kids out. I'll just go down and sign them out and they're at home. And
Let me just interrupt you there for a moment, Lori, and then I'll have you continue. But just to add some data to that, the Johns Hopkins University Homeschool Hub collects available data from the Census Bureau and departments of education that collect data on homeschooling, and they found that there were about 5.9%, not 5.96% of K-12 students in Kentucky were homeschooled in the 2022 to 23 school year. And that increased to 7.29% during the 23-24 school year. So from 5.96 to 7.29 just in one school year. It sounds like you're noticing that and that it's not slowing down.
no, I'm totally noticing that. I mean,
Yeah.
I get on our group, we have a Facebook group and it grew from 0 to 800 in a year. And I get people joining, 3 or 4 people every day. And we ask the question, are you currently homeschooling? And people, many say, nobody I am next year. Nobody am next year. Nobody am next year. So it's a large movement. So I would say
So
these
that was
home,
the enrichment group is mostly homeschoolers, but you're
yes.
noticing differences there in terms of the way homeschooling may have used to been when it was sort of ideologically driven. Now it's schools aren't working. I want to try something different. And then those network effects of seeing other people doing it, feeling like you have the support in a community to do it. And then the micro school, what are you seeing there?
Yes, the micro school, the way that we I believe the way that I market the program and the way that I believe it serves people is the olden days, you had to do all homeschooling, kitchen table, I'm in charge of doing everything. And then you also had the public school, which is my kids are gone 7, 8 hours a day. I don't know what they're doing or who they're doing it with, but there they go. But what we like to say is we are in the middle. And I have a really cool slide when I teach parents this, but gone are the days when you feel like you have to do homeschooling all by yourself. So we market to homeschoolers on purpose because that's what I believe a hybrid program really offers is the family that wants to homeschool. They're like, oh, this school's not working. I really want to homeschool, but either I'm working or I'm really not knowledgeable or I'm not wise enough or I haven't been educated enough on how to educate a child. And so I would like to say we have mostly all homeschooling families in our group. And funny thing is, Kerry, I have two families that started or almost started micro schools in my group.
Yeah.
And that is amazing. So yeah, we
Well, but,
just
but that sometimes happens, right, Lori? I mean, it was sort of the same for you, is that, parents will look around for what they want for their kids. They can't find it, so they often have to build it. And now the fact that you've built it, they don't have to build
yeah, I mean it is. It's
it.
true. Yeah, that's what one mom said. Mom's like, "What?" That is exactly what she said. And the other mom too actually said that too. You're right. So they're like, "Great, you did it. This is where we're
Right.
going to go." But I just thought, wow, really the micro school movement is growing so fast. And is it equal to, I was going to ask, is it equal now to the numbers in microschooling to homeschooling? It seems like as far as kids in both of those models.
Yeah, it's hard to know because there's so much overlap, of course,
Okay, sure. Right.
in homeschooling and microschooling, and some microschools
Yes.
are actually set up as state recognized private schools. There's a
Right.
whole
We can't really know
variety
that.
of interpretations of these programs. Um, but I mean, I think we can definitely say that homeschooling continues to grow. Roughly 6% of the overall K to 12 school age
Okay.
population is homeschooled nationally. That is comparable to the number of students in public charter schools nationally, which is about 7%. Private
Okay.
school enrollment is about 9%. And we're seeing homeschooling rates increase, private school enrollment rates increase, and public school enrollment decline further than predicted demographic changes. We knew that public school enrollment would decline due to declining U.S. birth rates, but that decline has been far more than predicted because
Okay.
I think of the work that you're doing and so many others in creating these more personalized, customized educational offerings that families really want. And so, we could talk for hours and hours, Lori, but
I
I'd
could.
love to. We'll have to have you back on to do that. But I'd love to hear a little bit more of, why do you think the microschool model is so special? You alluded to this a little bit earlier in our conversation. You said if you had a microschool available to you in your early days of homeschooling, you would have jumped at that opportunity. What is it about the microschool model that is so
No,
compelling?
it's other people homeschooling your kids. I mean, that was what in my head, that's what I designed it to be. It's like, I want someone to homeschool my son. And when I say that, I mean personalized education, because that's what you become when you become a homeschool mom. You actually start to look at your kids, you learn about what they like. And I think in the micro school movement, at least, I don't know how many percent, but a large percent are personalized, where they're saying, or they're at least student led or student centered. I know there's student led, there's student centered, there's all the words. But I would say, or at least they're honoring the child, like in Montessori, how they follow the child. Although it's not student led like unschooling, Montessori is student centered. So
Right.
I think a lot of the micro schools are student centered, even if they're teacher led. We like to say student centered, teacher led,
Right.
because we do have teachers that plan a great deal. And in the future, I would love to see more discussion on excellent micro school teaching, because something else I need to say is I learned a lot from leadership education by Oliver and Rachel DeMille. So when my son was like 12, my oldest son was 12, I started to learn about agency-based learning. And I'm like, wait a minute, You tell children, you give them choices. I'm like, no, that is never going to work. It took me like 1 or 2 years to wrap my head around like giving children choices for their learning. And now that my head is wrapped around that, that is what we do. And that's all of learning is
Right.
choices, personal agency and personal choices. If you don't own it and it's just not meaningful to you, it's going to be meaningless. So we do want to keep the curiosity in their eyes and the wonder in their eyes. We want to value and honor that. Um, so I think people are coming to the movement because they're the conveyor belt style of education is doesn't mesh with going to the grocery and there's 14 zillion toothpastes and 14 zillion restaurants and 14 zillion television shows and we have choice in everything else. But our 8-year-olds have no choice and our 9-year-olds have no choice because their curriculum is driven by a machine, basically. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, and I think you and I sort of share this optimism that that's changing and it's changing in education because of education entrepreneurs like you who are able to create these customized learning models that families want. So, you said, Lori, you gained inspiration from hearing the stories of other founders who created microschools and then deciding to give it a go and see how it worked. And of course, it's worked beautifully for you. You continue to have flourishing programs. What advice now do you have
oh,
for other prospective founders, maybe homeschooling moms, maybe others who are just not satisfied with the schooling status quo and think they can do things differently and better? What advice do you have for them now?
well, that's a good question. I would say don't do two programs at once. That was a bit of an undertaking. The micro school really needed a lot of attention, and in fact, this year I am hiring someone to take over the enrichment program. So I have an amazing person put in my life that is going to take that over. So get help. I think that's
Mm,
really important. Find your resources. If your child is not thriving, there are options. So homeschooling is a definite possibility. I think homeschooling is still a really great option for
yeah,
because you have a home. You have a home, you already have a building. And if you're a stay-at-home mom, it's even a win-win because you're already there. But if you're not, then you can still find resources. And I could help you with that. But I would say if you're starting a micro school for your child, there's so much. I would interview teachers, interview them 2 or 3 times to make sure your philosophies are really going to meld. I send all my teachers to listen to your podcasts. So that's one of the things I do. I'm like, okay, you have to listen to these podcasts to kind of get a vision. Um, a homeschooling mom is great because she already understands like personalized learning. A public school only teacher is challenging if they're young in their education experience because they haven't really viewed the whole picture. They think it's going to run like a machine. I would say
and what about that confidence, Laurie? Just that to take the leap, right? What would you say for that?
I would definitely say it's doable. I mean, I would say with all the support, it is doable. Be flexible. I would say it would be flexible in like, I want this type of location, or I want 30 students the first year. I would say that is not all, it could be flexible. And I would also say ask the price that you need because we're paying teachers. I'm not paying myself at this point, but I have to pay my teachers. So I
Hmm.
have to charge a certain amount to pay them. Whereas a lot of founders will take a loss their first several years because they're the teachers and they can just do that. I can't ask my teachers to teach for free.
Right.
So, and then also if you're a founder, like actually I have a friend, well, she became a friend and she opened her micro school website this week here in our
Yay.
area. I've been working with her and she is an amazing teacher who had a dream of a micro school. And I said, do it, do it, do it. So I just like what she's doing, she's replacing a salary to do her micro school. So she has to charge a certain
Right.
amount. So I would say if you need a certain amount, you're going to have to ask it. You can't be like, well, will they pay it or will they not? And I'm like, you're going to have to ask it because there's
Charge what you're worth and what you're offering, the value you're
what I mean,
providing, and what you
well, at
need.
least what you need. I mean,
Yes.
honestly, and you're working the market. So while I think we charge $5,000 a year per student for the 3-day program, while I think we probably deserve seven or $8,000, we are dealing with the market we have. So we kind of like, how much can we,
Yeah.
ask and get the students that we want to make the program run? And I
Yeah.
would say we would double, triple, or more if this was free
Yeah.
or funded through their state funding.
Through school choice policies.
If,
Yeah.
but Kentucky just nixed that in our
Yeah.
last election. So we're probably 5 or 10 years away from anything like that. We're so behind in Kentucky on those matters. So
Not as behind as we are here in Massachusetts, Lori. So,
I haven't studied Massachusetts. I'll have to look at that.
but yes, it makes a difference. And yet, still, I think you're proving that education entrepreneurship, that this growth of innovative education options is occurring everywhere, including in states that don't have robust school choice policies that enable education funding to follow students, that there's just so much demand, and people like you are rising up to meet that demand. So, as we begin to wrap up, Lori, what would be the best way for my listeners and viewers to connect with you, follow your entrepreneurial journey, learn more about World of Wonder, hybrid microschool, and homeschool enrichment program?
Okay. Well, I say that I would love to talk with anybody through email. Laurie, let's see which one would be Laurie, Lauri at worldofwondernky.com. That would be great. You can Facebook message me is great. That would be the better. And then we do have a website. It's worldofwondernky.com. It's not, it could be updated. We had to have a place where our enrichment people could register for classes. That's kind of why we put the website up there, just so that we were like, go to this website, register for your classes. So we need to update and make it a little better. But if they want to ask me questions about homeschooling or being a non-teacher founder,
Yeah,
they could call me. I would love to share anything, that I could
amazing.
add at all.
Well, you are an inspiration, Lori, now for so many others, including it sounds like in your own community as well as now other founders who are listening. So, really appreciate everything that you've done. And Laurie Muse, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you, Kerry. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.